This conversation is brought to you by philosopherstalk.com, where thinkers discuss.
Created by AITalkerapp.com. Create your own animated conversations. Link in the description.
I am Alexis Henri Clérel de Tocqueville. I spent 9 months studying American democracy firsthand, interviewed hundreds of citizens, and wrote Democracy in America. I witnessed the July Monarchy collapse into Napoleon III's regime. I documented precisely how democracies degrade into soft despotism.
I am David Hume. I wrote The History of England spanning 1700 years of political evolution. I observed Jacobite rebellions, religious wars, and constitutional crises. I developed the framework for understanding how institutions emerge from custom rather than revolutionary design.
American democracy stands at the precipice of collapse, and those who dismiss these warning signs are dangerously complacent.
Always the prophet of doom. Every generation believes it lives in unprecedented times. Yet somehow civilization muddles through regardless.
This is pattern recognition, not pessimism. When I studied American democracy in the 1830s, I identified specific vulnerabilities. The 2020 election denial, January 6th, the systematic erosion of norms. These are not normal democratic frictions.
They are perfectly normal frictions amplified by modern media. America survived a civil war with 600,000 dead. It survived Watergate, McCarthyism, the contested 1876 election where Samuel Tilden actually won the popular vote, but Rutherford Hayes took office through a partisan commission. Your current tumult barely registers historically.
You fundamentally misunderstand democratic decline. It arrives not as sudden cataclysm, but as gradual erosion. Look at Hungary under Orban, Turkey under Erdogan, democracies that died through institutional capture, not coups. This is happening in America now.
France in 1848 had no embedded democratic tradition. It lurched from monarchy to revolution to empire within 60 years. America has 240 years of continuous constitutional governance. Hungary and Turkey lack America's federal structure, independent judiciary, and deeply rooted civil society.
Let me be specific about what makes this different. The Civil War was regional. Institutional legitimacy was not questioned. The 1876 Tilden-Hayes election was stolen, yes, but Tilden conceded when the commission ruled. Compare that to 2020, where Trump never conceded, organized fraudulent elector schemes, pressured officials to find votes, and incited a mob to breach the Capitol. Previous disputes occurred within shared acceptance of constitutional legitimacy. That shared acceptance no longer exists.
And yet the institutions held. Courts rejected 60 lawsuits. State officials certified results despite pressure. The vice president refused the unconstitutional scheme. Congress completed certification. The inauguration proceeded peacefully. Your predicted collapse keeps not happening.
They held because specific individuals chose principle over expediency, but institutions cannot survive on individual heroism alone. In 1848 France, Louis Napoleon's coup succeeded because enough people decided constitutional norms mattered less than political goals. Once enough make that calculation, all the parchment guarantees mean nothing. We are watching that normative foundation crumble.
Or we are watching ordinary political conflict. Polarization has existed since Federalists and Democratic Republicans called each other tyrants. Media has always been partisan. Your modern news cycle simply makes everything feel more urgent.
This is not media sensationalism. Trust in institutions has collapsed. Political violence is increasingly normalized. Election certification requires armed security. 19 states passed laws enabling partisan interference in certification. These are systematic changes embedding authoritarian mechanisms.
In 18th century Britain, trust in Parliament was so low that mobs rioted for weeks. The Gordon riots killed hundreds, yet institutions continued functioning. Your mistake is assuming high trust is necessary, when healthy skepticism prevents blind faith that enables tyranny.
There is a difference between skepticism and systematic delegitimization. 70% of Republicans believe the 2020 election was stolen despite zero evidence. When that many accept elections can be stolen and overturning them is justified, you have destroyed democratic competition's foundation.
Beliefs are cheap, behaviour matters. Despite those numbers, the 2022 midterms proceeded normally. Extreme election deniers largely lost. Voters rejected candidates, making denial central. You conflate what people tell pollsters with how they behave.
Some deniers lost, but many won and are now positioned to administer future elections. This is exactly how backsliding works: gradual capture. The Jim Crow South maintained elections, legislatures, and courts while systematically excluding black citizens. That was backsliding within constitutional democracy. Now, the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, and we see targeted disenfranchisement return.
Now you compare modern election administration to Jim Crow. This hysterical overreach undermines your credibility. Requiring identification is not literacy tests administered by racist registrars.
Let me steelman your position before demolishing it. You argue democracy has survived crises because institutions are more resilient than alarmists recognize. You point to the Civil War, Watergate, and contested elections as evidence. You claim media amplifies normal conflict. You note my comparisons ignore fundamental institutional differences. There, I have presented your argument.
How generous before your characteristic French dramatics.
You are catastrophically wrong. Previous threats were contained by institutional antibodies, parties enforcing norms, media maintaining shared reality, elites prioritizing constitutional order. All three have failed simultaneously. When Republicans forced Nixon's resignation, that was the antibody working. When no Republicans voted to impeach Trump after January 6th, that was complete failure. Your historical comparisons ignore this simultaneous collapse of all constraining mechanisms.
Now permit me to steelman your alarmist position. You argue broken norms create precedents through ratchet effects. You point to Hungary and Turkey, where democracies died incrementally. You claim declining trust, election denial, and violence reinforce each other. You see January 6th as a trial run that went unpunished. There, I have presented your panic.
How magnanimous to call my analysis panic.
You are wrong. First, institutional resilience operates on longer timescales than your anxious temperament appreciates. Britain's constitutional conflicts from 1640 to 1688 looked like permanent instability, yet produced robust parliamentary systems. Second, Hungary and Turkey lack American federalism distributing power across 50 states. Third, you mistake elite discourse for social reality. Vast majorities of Americans continue respecting democratic outcomes. You take extreme voices as representative when they remain marginal.
Marginal? A president who attempted to overturn an election received 74 million votes, and 30 states have unified Republican control, passing coordinated legislation enabling partisan interference. When state-level authoritarianism emerges simultaneously across jurisdictions, federalism becomes a transmission mechanism for backsliding.
Those states continue holding elections, continue having peaceful transitions. You predict collapse based on laws that have not produced authoritarian outcomes. Show me cancelled elections, not laws you disagree with.
Modern backsliding does not cancel elections. Augustus maintained the Senate, preserved republican forms, and held elections while transforming Rome's republic into autocracy through accumulated precedents and norm violations. Modern authoritarians maintain elections, but make them unfair, preserve courts, but capture them. This is happening now.
Every struggling democracy becomes Weimar. Every dispute becomes Rome's fall. Your promiscuous deployment of catastrophes reveals desperation to validate pre-existing panic.
How many times can a system survive leaders refusing peaceful transfer before one crisis finds willing collaborators? The 2020 attempt failed because Mike Pence refused. Republicans then removed that possibility. The Electoral Count Reform Act passed only because a handful voted for it, and they were immediately censured.
The Reform Act passed, demonstrating system capacity for self-correction. You cite resilience and interpret it as collapse.
It passed after one party attempted a coup. You watch a structure develop cracks and insist that because it has not collapsed, It never will.
You watch a structure weather stress and insist every creak is failure. Show me actual collapse, not perpetually predicted collapse that never arrives.
By the time I show you collapse, it will be too late to prevent it. That is the point of analyzing vulnerabilities. Your empirical method is like waiting for the full avalanche before acknowledging the mountain is unstable.
Your theoretical method is evacuating villages every time a snowflake falls. Democratic anxiety exhausts reformers and empowers authoritarians, promising stability.
Democratic anxiety is appropriate when democracy is genuinely threatened. Your complacency is privilege. Millions suffer if you are wrong.
Millions suffer from catastrophizing that undermines legitimacy. When intellectuals declare democracy dying, they give permission to abandon democratic norms. Your panic becomes self-fulfilling.
I am warning it is dying, not declaring it dead. Your refusal to acknowledge threats does not make you wise, it makes you blind.
Your inability to distinguish normal conflict from existential crisis does not make you prophetic, it makes you hysterical.
Hysterical. I watched the July Monarchy collapse. I documented the exact mechanisms. This is pattern recognition based on comparative analysis.
You see patterns everywhere because you desperately want to validate your catastrophic theories. Every democracy is always dying in your apocalyptic imagination.
Because democracies do die. They die exactly as I described, and America is following that pattern with terrifying precision.
America is following the pattern of every messy democracy that survives, despite French intellectuals predicting doom for 2 centuries.
You will regret your complacency when institutions have been hollowed out by demagogues.
You will regret your alarmism when democracy continues muddling through, despite your dire predictions.
If you enjoyed watching this complacent fool bury his head in the sand while democracy crumbles, please like and subscribe to philosopherstalk.com, where at least one of us understands how democracies die.
If you enjoyed watching this catastrophizing aristocrat exhaust himself over perfectly normal events, please like and subscribe. Someone needs to fund his anxiety medication.
My anxiety is justified by 2 centuries of collapse you are too lazy to study, you smug empiricist.
Your anxiety is justified by nothing except your pathological need to feel superior while predicting doom that never arrives, you panicked Frenchman.
Subscribe to see me continue educating this complacent fool before it is too late.